Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Florence Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, commonly known as FUF. FUF. So my name is Sally Wantz, and it's my pleasure to be your service leader today. Behind the camera, we have Jay Gutler. And then over here, on my left, your right, is Ray. Turn around and smile, Ray. Hello. We're all practicing safe distancing today. I think we're each at least 10 feet apart. And before we begin today's service, we're going to sing our hymn, number 123. It's called Spirit of Life. I'll be glad to sing it up here. If anybody else in the room wants to sing along, that'd be great. So Ray, if you'll play this. This was recorded by Jeff Lovejoy, and we just love Spirit of Life. So let's begin. Spirit of life. Sunday, what is this, October 11th? Oh my gosh. So Sunday 11th, we have determined that it's going to be raining, so we're not going to do a picnic. But we will have a Zoom call at 5 p.m. We invite you to join us, all of you. I mean, this notice goes out to over 200 people. We would love to have that many people join us on a Zoom call. Come on, join us. Introduce yourself to us if you haven't been with us for a while. And let us meet and greet and say hello. So Zoom call, Sunday the 11th at 5 p.m. However, next weekend, the 17th, which is a Saturday, we are pleased to have a meet and greet with our new Reverend Elizabeth Mount. You are more than welcome to come join us from noon to 2 p.m. on Saturday. If the weather is crummy, we'll do the meet and greet on Sunday, okay? And she's going to provide us with a fabulous Sunday service message. Probably one that is more like, hi, I'm Elizabeth Mount, I'm your new minister, and here's what we're up to. So it's probably going to be a big introduction from Elizabeth to you. So that's going to be coming up. And we have a board meeting coming up on Wednesday. That would be Wednesday the 14th. Wednesday the 14th at 3:30 via Zoom. If you want to be a part of that board meeting, send us an email at florence.unitarian@gmail.com. and we'll send you a Zoom invite. So, board meeting Wednesday, Zoom call tonight, Sunday, and then next weekend, Reverend Elizabeth Mount. So, Jay, Ray, are there any announcements from you two fellas? If not, we're going to go into the chalice lighting. And I'm going to invite Jay to come forward as we light the chalice. And I invite you at home to get a candle and light this with us, as I offer the following words from Sean Trapp. This is titled, A Fire in the Universe. Our chalice reminds us that the fire within ourselves is the same fire that illuminates the universe. It is our reminder that all is connected, even though the space of the void is vast. And our experience here is but a blip in the cosmic timeline. This flame, your flame at home, is our promise that in our smallness and our short time on this earth, that we live intently and deeply with love for one another, with honesty and integrity, to be guided by rational thought and critical thinking, and with a sense of shared responsibility. For as the late astronomer Carl Sagan reminds us, This pale blue dot is the only home we've ever known. Catherine Hemmons is not able to be with us today. Gosh darn it, because she does a really good job with joys and concerns. But this is a time when we receive information from you, perhaps a joy or a concern or a thought that you have that you'd like to share with others. So it's your time to do that. If you want to send that to us by email, send it to us and we'll make sure we have it for next week. You can send your joy, your concern, or your sorrow to florence.unitarian@gmail.com and we'll share that next week. But at this time I know Roy, hello, what's your name again? Ray. I just nicknamed you Roy. Okay, so Ray has a joy or a concern or two. I'm going to invite him up. Drop your shell.
Roy here. I just actually wanted to give a shout out to two people who really stepped up to help during this COVID mess, and it's Catherine Hemmons and Jay Gettler. They've just been doing all kinds of extra stuff and are always helpful. So thank you guys.
Big joy. Yeah. So Jay, do you have a joy? Come on forward.
This is the joy today. I don't know if you're all on Bruce Yell's Facebook pages or anything like that, but he's been going through his end-of-life journey, and he's been sharing it with us in a very articulate and beautiful way, and I just wanted to give a shout out to him today.
Would you drop another shell? You know, in a couple of weeks, we will bring to you a very special message from Bruce. He tape recorded a message to us a couple of weeks ago, and it will be a part of our Sunday service, I think on the 18th. So look forward to that. It's a gut-wrenching, heartfelt, and I don't know, sort of an uplifting message from a guy who's going through a lot of stuff. So we are so appreciative of Bruce Yelly and for what he brings to us. Okay? So having said that, I'm going to ask Jay if you'll drop one more shell for us, please. And this one is for anyone, anywhere. If you have a joy or concern that you've not shared with us, that shell in the rippling water represents our understanding of that, even though we don't know it. It's our ability to be able to be with you through any time, any joy, concern, or sorrow you might have. And that's what that shell represents. So, blessed be. I found, through our library of music, a wonderful musical interlude from Jeff Lovejoy. It's entitled Enter with Care. And I thought it would be sort of appropriate today. It's kind of a whimsical, fun, but delightful piece. I invite you to sit back, close your eyes, and enjoy this music. Let your mind wander wherever it wants to. And Jay's going to take our camera and shine a light on our geese. So, Ray, would you please play that? to the weather that's outside as we tape this program. We're taping this on Friday morning about 10:30, and it's sort of drizzling, so it sort of reminds me of the raindrops. So thank you for that, Jeff. So this particular Sunday morning service comes from Dr. Ruth Miller. We are glad she's back with us. She has a special message about conscious evolution. Who we choose to be, that will determine how we evolve or not. Ruth always makes us think and encourages us to live our best lives. So with this, I introduce you now to our friend, Dr. Ruth Miller.
All right. Hey, hello, Florence. I don't see you, but I'm certainly feeling your presence, and I trust that everything is unfolding in a perfectly wonderful way. Now, why did I choose this topic, conscious evolution? Well, for one thing, it's the topic of the month for some of the churches that I work with, so it's something that we've been wrestling with and talking about and thinking about. But more importantly, it's really, really, really a time when we need to make this process we're going through a conscious, intentional, aware process. And what is this process we're going through? Well, some people say that we're actually developing a new species of the genus Homo, and others are simply saying that each of us is evolving into becoming more of who we can be, and others are calling this a time of ascension, that is beginning to operate at a totally new level of consciousness and perhaps operating in more dimensions. I am operating right now in a room in Texas, and I'll be here for a few more weeks, but I expect to be back on the coast in November and be able to see you all more in person, and that'll feel really good. In the meantime, what is it that's going on? Why are we saying these things? Why is it that we think this is happening, right? So first of all, I want to talk about evolution. The concept of evolution carries a lot of baggage today, as we all know, because there are certain very vocal religious minorities who want us to think that it's not possible that the universe is several billion years old, that the earth is several billion years old, and they are absolutely convinced, and it's fascinating to watch them on YouTube, try to prove that the dinosaurs were here when Noah's flood happened, and that happened within the last 4,000 to 6,000 years. And there is just the tiniest little kernel of truth to what they're saying, which is why I like to follow up on them. And that has to do with the fact that there's a lot of evidence saying that the form of who we are is not a random thing, that there is in fact some continuity of field, if you will, of force, of image, of something that unfolds in one place and unfolds then in other places very much like it. A recent photograph was of an embryo salamander, and the photograph showed the form in energetic image around the embryo of the adult salamander. Wow, right? If we look at what's happening in the body, in the womb, one of the things I got to do when I was a kid is my mother worked at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. When she had to work overtime or weekends, guess who was my babysitter, right? So I had all kinds of favorite displays, including that room-size railroad train. Wow, the model railroad train. But one of them that fascinated me was this big, very dark room that had brightly lit images around the room, 37 images for 37 weeks of the development of the human infant in the womb. So, of course, the first few weeks, it could be anything at all. And then at one point, it starts looking like a tadpole. At another point, it looks like a lemur. At another point, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not really until the last 6 weeks or so, as many as 10 or 12, depending, that begins to look kind of like a human being. And then, of course, when it's a newborn in our hands, and I remember my first baby's head just sitting in my hand, I was just totally amazed that anything human could be that small and that complete and that whole. So when I got to college, I started studying anthropology. My aunt, who was an anthropologist also, would occasionally just spout out the phrase, well, ontology follows phylogeny, which is to say that the form of any being unfolds and becomes what it is according to the evolution of the species of which it has in which it has participated or from which it has evolved. Wow. Yeah. So, the nematode is never going to look like a human, right? And a chimpanzee is never going to look like a human. But we've been through all of these other, evolutionary processes. So then we come out and we look like a newborn baby. Absolutely adorable if you're a mom. Probably not if you're not. Okay. Then this little tiny, tiny thing is suddenly crawling around and rolling around and then running around and has very little to do, except in general terms, with that newborn infant. All the proportions are different for one thing. And then it grows up and it grows up. And each stage of the evolution of the body, or the development, which is the word we tend to use, is somewhat different from the previous stages. But evolution and development are often used interchangeably, and that's part of why I want to talk about it as something we want to be in control of, or aware of at least, or choosing, right? So in the New Thought tradition, which evolved during the 1800s, developed in the 1800s, when people began to realize that when they stopped thinking their old way and began to think a very new way, they not only had different kinds of experiences, their bodies began to change, their ways of thinking and feeling and relating began to change, the people around them began to change, the very world in which they seemed to be living began to change. So they called it New Thought and led to a new life, right? So when we start seeing this, we start seeing the possibility of changing the pattern on which we were evolving, the process by which we were developing into something. And now, as we choose from one set of thoughts to another set of thought, we begin to have a different kind of possibility open up. Now, back in the 1960s, before the word evolution had all the baggage it has today, a woman named Barbara Marx married a man named Mr. Hubbard. I've forgotten his name. I think it was Marx. But Barbara Marx became Barbara Marx Hubbard. And she and her pretty wealthy husband were trying to figure out how to make a difference in the world. And she ended up creating the Institute for Conscious Evolution. And she drew very heavily on the Hindu tradition of yoga, Hindu and Buddhist traditions of yoga, which has to do not with physical postures. We're not talking about maintaining our balance or going into warrior stance or downward dog. We're not talking about any of that when we're talking about yoga. It can be incorporated, but doesn't have to be. We're talking about a way of thinking, a way of being mindful, a way of focusing on how our minds and bodies are working, and ultimately a way of choosing how they are working. And that's a huge thing that we need to be aware of when we need to think of, when we're thinking about yoga or any of the various forms of psychological and whatever development in those traditions, Buddhist and Hindu. So that idea of yoga is a Sanskrit word, yoga, out of which we get our word yoke. And I'm not talking about egg yolks. I'm talking about yoking oxen, joining two together, ultimately with the merging of the individual in the totality of the one. So yoga is a shortcut, a way to get to the completion of all of the cycles that in the Hindu and Buddhist tradition are born and then born again and then born again and then born again in different bodies, trying to work through all the things that we have built up in our psyche that need to be cleansed, need to be eradicated. And yoga is one of the ways to do that. Yay! And as you do these various things, various processes in the yoga tradition, then you not only begin to become aware of what's going on inside, you begin to eliminate that which no longer serves you. Now, if you're interested in doing that form of yoga, I strongly recommend finding a good translation of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, 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 because he's the one who laid it out. Probably, you know, there's dates all over the map on this, but probably 1600 BC was the first version of the Yoga Sutras that Patanjali laid out. Now, sutra means verse, okay? And so each of the verses has a whole lot of meaning and unpacked in them. And perhaps the most detailed unpacking is by Christopher Isherwood and Swami Vivekananda, and they called their book How to Know God. So if you want to know more about that way of practicing yoga, that'd be fabulous. Or you can actually do the processes in Genuine Happiness by B. Alan Wallace, who worked with Tibetan Lamas for years and has a foreword by the Dalai Lama in his book. And it's the whole process from beginning through to completion of the yoga meditation processes. All right, so back to the story. So when Barbara Marx Hubbard was creating the Institute of Conscious Evolution, or for Conscious Evolution, there were no cell phones, there was no email, there was no internet. It was photocopies and telephones and flying to meet with people. And nonetheless, there were thousands of groups, study groups, forming that institute all over the world, and particularly in the US. And this lasted well into the 80s. Then she ran for vice president with Dr. Benjamin Spock. Some of you may remember that, with the Peace Party, trying to wake up the American voter, you know. And I got to work with her a little bit at that point. And then she pulled back after that process of going out and talking to voters and seeing really how far behind Americans are from where she had dreamed we might be. She began to discover the New Thought churches. And she found, you know, she was being invited to speak at places like Michael Beckwith's Agape Center, or Mary Manning Morrissey's Living Enrichment Center, or the Mountain High Church in Denver, and any number of places like that. And she realized that here was a group of folks who were ready to do the work, who were not only ready, but they'd already begun to do the work. So she got very excited. And she helped them form something called the Association for Global New Thought, with the intention of bringing this set of practices into the global environment. And that caused all kinds of ruckuses in the New Thought movement, because here was yet another association. There were already 3 or 4. And so, you know, things didn't happen quite as intended, but by creating that, she literally reached thousands of people to take New Thought from being an individual process to being a global process, a process that might affect and make a difference for the whole world. So as we go forward with this, what we begin to see is that the New Thought movement and the Conscious Evolution movement merged for 10, 15 years. And then along about, well, let's say 2012, the whole Mayan end of the world thing, yeah. A bunch of people who were not in the New Thought movement found the original work and were all excited about it. So they recreated the Institute for Conscious Evolution. And the goal for all of this is to become fully who we are, rather than to be stuck in what we were trained to be. All right, to be as wise as we can be, to be as strong as we can be, to be as healthy as we can be, to reframe and reform the body as necessary, because we do know how. We have the skills, whether it's using an individual process or a shared process or a group process. A practitioner's job partly is to help us do these things. So as the New Thought movement unfolded and expanded, as the Institute for Conscious Evolution unfolded and expanded, as Barbara Marx Hubbard wrote more books, the concept began to explode. And what was she teaching? She was teaching that we can choose. We can choose by learning to focus on what we are actually thinking and choosing what we are thinking instead of thinking what we have habitually thought. We can choose to become more of who we truly are. And we can choose not only for ourselves individually, we can, through a process that Rupert Sheldrake calls morphogenetic fields, we can shift the overall field that includes all of us and shares and is shared by all of us everywhere. And as we shift that field, then all of humanity can shift, which gets us to what's really going on around this possibility of a new species of the genus Homo. So some of you may be aware that the species that we are, Homo sapiens sapiens, is part of a long line that many of which are just branches and existed all at the same time of this genus Homo, okay? So there's Dryopithecus, there is Neanderthalensis, there are all these other ones, and there are more and more new ones as people are finding evidence for them in various places around the world. Each one of these had a strength that the other ones didn't have. The Neanderthal had a huge brain, but they didn't have the vocal cords that Sapiens sapiens had, so they didn't communicate verbally in the same way, which meant they didn't work communally or congregationally or cooperatively in quite the same way. They did in other ways because they had some kind of nonverbal communication that was very, very sophisticated as far as we can tell, looking back. Some of the other species of the genus Homo had other capabilities that we can see. Now, this new species, according to the Mayans in particular, and according to all the evidence of the folks that have been following this movement of conscious evolution, has the capacity, has a strength to not only be in touch with the intuition, the individual intuition, but to share that intuition in a larger group. And you may have heard of indigo kids, for example, who were, as young children, in touch with each other, however distant they might be. You may have heard of crystal children who are in touch with all kinds of things and may or may not be able to communicate them. So as we look forward, as we go forward, what we may see is more and more of the inner capabilities being developed, maybe less and less of the manual dexterity, the material capabilities. There is a wonderful book called Vision by Ken Kesey, excuse me, not Keys, not the guy who did 100th Monkey and all the psychedelic bus stuff, okay? And in this book, he lays out the information that his intuition, his channeling, if you will, gave him about what humanity is going to be doing. And it totally conforms to all these other things. And it says that humanity, sheerly by our capacity to transform who we are through our thoughts, through our words, through our actions, are going to be able to live under the ocean, live at very high altitudes, live in all kinds of places that we can't live today, and live on other planets as well. And so that'll be very interesting to watch, but we're talking about centuries, so some of us may not be in our bodies at that time. But that is another evolutionary trait. We will probably see more and more people living longer and longer as they are more in control of and conscious of what is going on in the development and evolution of their being. So today, in this world, what are we dealing with? What we're dealing with is the results of being unconscious for generations. Basically since World War II. We went on, and maybe even World War I, as a race or a species or as a nation or as a culture, choose any word you want in there, we have been shutting down and becoming less and less conscious And individually, people have become more and more conscious, more and more aware of the issues and the results of that reduced consciousness. So we've been doing both at the same time. The bulk of people have been reducing their consciousness, and individuals have been lifting their consciousness. It happens that statistically, if 30% of the world population raises their consciousness, the rest will be brought up to something more than they are now. If 10% raise their consciousness a whole lot, the rest will be brought up some, and so on. So if 30% comes up to, let's say, half of what we're capable of being, then the rest of the world will generally, most of the rest of the world come up to, say, 20 to 30% of what we're capable of being instead of 10%, which is what we were taught, and where most of us are stuck. So in a world where relatively unconscious people have chosen to, in many ways, devolve their capacities in writing and reading and arithmetic, to choose three, in problem solving, in analysis, in what is called critical thinking, any of those things, we're also seeing people who are choosing to evolve further. And the combination looks very awful when we're going through that. It's normal. It's absolutely normal. What we are seeing is the breaking down of a process of devolution, so that all the institutions that contributed to it are breaking apart. And that's not fun. And at the same time, we're growing ourselves. We're becoming more fully who we can be individually. And that individual development, the more conscious we are, the more choiceful we are, the more intentional we are, is going to make more and more difference for the whole. So our job, my request, is that each and every one of us seriously consider each and every choice. Are we choosing to become more fully who we are, who we could be, who we've longed to be all of our being, all of our lives? Or are we allowing the culture to devolve us further away from that? Every choice, every day, is a contribution to that process, one direction or the other. And the more individuals can choose to lift their consciousness, the more the rest of the world has the potential for doing the same. Conscious evolution. Let's make it as intentional and conscious as we can, because we are evolving, whether we like it or not. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ruth. So good to see you, and glad to know you're doing well wherever you are. So every choice, every day, are we choosing to become more fully who we are and who we could be and who we long to be? Or are we allowing the culture of what's going on around us to move us away from that choice? Let's lift our consciousness to a higher level, and by doing so, the rest of the world has the potential to follow us. I just love that idea. Conscious evolution. Let's make it as intentional and conscious as possible, because we are evolving whether we like it or not. Again, thank you, Ruth Miller. So glad to see you. Our offering today, I'm going to use the one we've used before because it's a really good one, from Kayla Parker. She's on the staff of the UUA and provides the words we share for today's offering. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. There is no doubt about it. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than we could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. May we give in love and in hope. And may we also remember our friends at Food Backpacks for Kids, that provides meals to our students in both Florence and Mapleton. Let's help keep their pantry full so kids can have their meal when they might not otherwise have one over the weekend. You can mail your contributions to FOOF at P.O. Box 2502, Florence 97439, or you can click on our donate button on our website, which is florence.uuf.com, florenceuuf.com. And there's a convenient way to donate there. You can designate how much you'd like to go to FOOF and how much you'd like to go to Food for Backpacks, and we'll take care of it. So as we move forward with our offertory, I like to have some kind of a reading to ground us in that giving. And if you would repeat after me, divine love through me,
Divine love through me,
blesses and multiplies all that I am,
blesses and multiplies all that I am,
all that I give,
all that I give,
and all that I receive.
and all that I receive.
I am prosperous now.
I am prosperous now.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.
I invite Jay to come back up as we extinguish the flame of our chalice. You can extinguish yours at home as I share the words from Robin Gray. The flame in our chalice is extinguished, but not our hope for the future, our courage in the face of crisis, or the love we share in all the world. Blessed be. So we've come to another end of another fabulous Sunday. Again, we hope you'll join us on the Zoom call at 5 p.m., board meeting on Wednesday, Reverend Elizabeth next weekend. Lots happening. We hope to see you either virtually or in person. It would really be great to see you. Board meeting, and then Reverend Elizabeth. So we're going to close with our peace song. Ray, should we play that one that Jeff recorded for us a while ago? And I wish you well. I'm going to invite Jay to come back up as we sing our peace song. Ray, you can sing too.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with love as a center.